Chapter 8: A Brutal Attack. My bedroom is my favorite room in the house. It's been carefully designed, but in a style that's very unique to me. I even have a large wall picture of my French bulldog, CV. It blends nicely and actually adds to the room. I lose most people with the picture of a dog, unless, of course, they're animal lovers. It's Tuesday night and I'm relaxing on my bed watching television. CB is at my feet snoring. Talia is cooing beside me. Gucci, my psychologically challenged parrot, is meandering the halls, whistling the tune to the Andy Griffin show. And I'm waiting for a call from Erik. I'm not used to having to wait for simple things like talking with a friend. It's strange not being able to pick up the phone and call him. My gaze keeps veering towards the clock. Time slows. I am nearly lulled to sleep. The telephone rings. My heart kicks against my chest, jolting me awake. I almost frown at my ridiculous anticipation at hearing Erik's voice. Tammy, I tell myself. Despite having kissed him, he really is just a friend. I might have spent more time explaining that to myself if I hadn't already snatched up the phone receiver and said hello. At this time, the annoying automated recording from the prison will click on and tell me I have a collect call from an inmate at California State Prison. As if all reason has suspected itself, I'm actually looking forward to it. But the recording doesn't come. Tammy? Says a female voice over the line. My heart slows. It's not Erik. This is Becky. How are you? Becky is the girlfriend of Erik's cellmate, Brian. She is a sweet, sharp, bubbly person. I'm fine, I say. I do my best to mask my disappointment. In fact, I'm just waiting on a call from Erik. Right. Look, I just got off the phone with Brian. I've got some bad news. My stomach is in a knot. What's wrong? Are you sitting down? Tell me. Erik was out on the yard today. There was a fight. My eyes close. My voice nearly fails. Not Erik. Yes, but he's alive. Oh God, how is he? He got hurt pretty bad. The weak are dominated in maximum security prisons. They are preyed upon physically and jabbed and tormented psychologically until they succumb to unspeakable indignities, sexual abuse, and perpetual victimization, literally bought and sold by the strong. To avoid this fate, many join forces with a gang for protection, or they make a stand and fight a battle they will not win. Whether it means losing one fight or 100, losing is not the worst fate. Because in losing, with honor, a fortunate few liberate themselves from the hordes of bullies who attack those that will not fight back. I would learn later that this is a code Erik knew when he entered prison a year earlier. One he would relearn in stages. Respect in prison is earned with blood. The morning of November 4th brought a cloudless sky and 70-degree temperatures to California. Erik felt none of it. He had received news that his brother, in a prison hundreds of miles to the south, had been the victim of a surprise attack by several prisoners because he refused to relent to their pressures for protection money. Still, his brother had held his ground. You have to, Erik had told me. If you give in once, you will be forced to 1,000 times. Of course, so-called rich kids from Beverly Hills aren't expected to fight back. In his heart, Erik was no more of a rich kid than he was from Beverly Hills. Despite media claims, he had been born and raised in New York and New Jersey. Yet the media embellished and perpetrated the myth. Erik had already been beset by other prisoners in isolated struggles and fights behind the scenes to test his measure. On this day, he would be forced to confront the soft rich kid myth one more time. Erik exited 2 block mid-morning with a crowd of prisoners. The main exercise yard is a vast enclosed area with a circular road that serves as a track, a grass field, and 2 concrete basketball courts. The sweeping green hills of the valley stretch above gray walls, creating a limited but picturesque vista. Sadly, the beauty is marred by the stark prison walls and the rising body heat of 500 men exercising, sweating, bartering, trading, persuading, and interacting. The mass is watched over by armed rifle-toting guards in a series of gun towers, and at least 2 more guards who patrol the grounds. Erik was walking on the circular road that runners use for track when another prisoner, a black man about his height, approached. He wanted to discuss Erik's possible support in his bid for election onto the Inmate Advisory Council. The IAC is the body of prisoners who act as a kind of liaison between the administrations and the prison populace. As they talked, they weaved through a sea of prisoners. When they neared the clearing of the grass field, Erik spotted a man whom he had loaned a book to weeks earlier. They cut across the road towards the man. Scotty, Erik called. Scotty was a stocky, muscular man in his mid-20s. He searched the river of people to see who had called him. Then he spied Erik. What do you want? I'd like to get my book back from you, Erik said. Don't have it. What does that mean? Scotty hastily scanned the length of the yard and pointed to the far side of the grass field, where groups of men were hovering around card tables. You see that big guy at the end? Erik saw him. He was a monster of a man, easily 6'5" and about 300 pounds. Yeah, he said, dragging out the word. He's got it now, so get it from him. For obvious reasons, this didn't sound like a good idea. Erik was alert enough to recognize a bad situation. Ordinarily, he might have just let it go. It was only a book, but in doing so, he would send a message that would cause him far more problems down the road. No, he said firmly, aware of the line he was drawing. I loaned you the book. I think you better go get it from him. Scotty's eyes widened. His chest heaved. Don't you be telling me what to do, he said quickly. He punched his hand out and slammed 2 fists into Erik's chest. The force sent Erik reeling 4 feet backwards. A wide space formed in the crowd, like a sea parting. Dozens of eyes flashed on them. For the briefest moments, the world paused, and no one moved. Both men looked for the other to yield. Neither did. Neither could once the first blow had been struck and the crowd had seen it. So they charged. Scotty's fist glazed off Erik's shoulders. Erik's fist struck solidly against the man's jaw. The punch buckled Scotty's legs and knocked him to the ground. He looked up at Erik, stunned. Then he started to rise. Erik stepped forward to keep him from standing. But the man was fast. He caught Erik around the waist and used his own body weight to roll him to the ground. Down on the yard, screamed a guard from the central watchtower over the speaker. Down on the yard! Hundreds of prisoners across the yard stopped whatever they were doing, turned in search of the commotion, and then lowered themselves to the ground where they had stood. Bullets were notoriously inaccurate. Although rifles were only supposed to be used for when a prisoner was being stabbed, accidents were known to happen. Few prisoners knew exactly what was happening, and nobody wanted to be caught in the crossfire. On top of Erik, Scotty wildly clawed and punched. Erik managed to squeeze his hand up to the man's chest and shove him off of him. By all respects, the fight should have been over. Who wants to fight when a rifle is being pointed at you? But Scotty was intent on greater satisfaction after being struck down in front of so many people. He was bleeding from his face and chest and was angry. Erik heard a new voice holler, "Get down!" Suddenly something powerful rammed into Erik's back. His body rocketed forward and plowed into the ground. Then a fist struck the back of his head. Another hit his neck. Another collided with the left side of his face. The world flickered and momentarily went black. This was a guard on his back hitting him, he realized. Fist after fist struck his head and neck. He tried to curl up in order to show no resistance, but it felt like a bull was pinning him down. The punches kept landing. What is happening, Erik thought. He turned his eyes to look up at the guard. A fist smacked him on the cheek. Blue lights flashed in his head. He raised his hands to cover his now bloodied face. A few moments later, the punches stopped. His hands were yanked behind his back and bound with metal cuffs. His body was hauled across the grass like a slain animal. Scotty, still uncuffed, managed to reach out a fist and strike a blow on Erik's mouth. Erik was pulled from the field onto the track. The skin on his chest and stomach tore as he was dragged over the asphalt. Another guard stepped forward and kicked him in the ribs, then again and again. At that point, prisoners around them and on the field began heckling the guards with insults. Erik was heaved to his feet by strong hands. Blood now dripped from the left side of his face, chest, and stomach. Guards blocked off the area. All this, Erik thought, over a book. What he could not know then, but would later learn, was that a new measure of him had been instilled in the minds of men who had seen him defend himself. Already the whispering had begun. So the kid from LA really could fight. Still, he thought, there must be easier ways than this. That's everything Brian told me, Becky says, when she finished recounting what had happened. He saw the whole thing, everyone did. Did he say how bad Erik was hurt? Brian said he was bruised and bleeding. I can't believe this is happening. I was just with him. It's a shock, I know. Where is he now? They put him in the hole. The hole? It's what they call administrative segregation. That's where they put people for investigation and for punishment. Can he call me? No. He doesn't even get one call? Tammy, there's no privileges in the hole. He's kept completely isolated from the main population. It's not a place you want to be, obviously, but he'll get through it. Can I write him? And then it hits me. He's going to receive my Georgia letter while he's in the hole. I was going to talk to him about it tonight. I suddenly feel sick. This can't be happening. Sure, Becky says, and when I don't say anything, she adds, it's going to be all right, Tammy. My voice is weak, helpless. He didn't even start the fight. That never matters, but Brian thinks maybe because of that, he'll be out soon. I was supposed to fly out there in 3 weeks. He can still get visits behind glass. Then maybe I should go now. He's gotta be lonely. I want to leave now to see for myself that he is all right. I feel a sudden and powerful need to get to him. I'm sure he has friends closer who can go visit him and maybe let you know how he is. He's gonna be okay, Tammy. It could have been a lot worse. At least he wasn't stabbed. That happens in prison. That's no comfort at all. Stabbed? What kind of world is this? I feel so naive as to what Erik is dealing with every day. Apparently, I'm only just finding out now. When sitting with Erik in the relatively peaceful visiting room, it's so hard to wrap my mind around the realities of prison. The prison system keeps most of its incidents hidden, tightly sealed, within their own documentation. Anyway, the only time you really hear about a stabbing or injury at a prison is when a guard is injured. The Department of Corrections makes sure the public hears of it. A few years ago, a story broke in the media about prisoners being forced by those who worked in the cell block to participate in deadly gladiator fights. Bets were made on which prisoners would survive. Erik says the practice of pitting prisoners against one another is in subtler ways rampant in the system and usually never reported. Even the extreme form of the practice, the so-called gladiator fights staged at Corcoran State Prison, weren't reported until a correctional captain bravely broke the code of silence and informed the FBI. For his efforts, the captain's life was, of course, turned upside down. Certainly, most guards don't want to be needlessly cruel, but too many have fallen into the mentality that prisoners are a subhuman class who should be treated with only contempt. I don't have to wonder how this affects the prisoners who are eventually released. Suddenly, I feel incredibly sad. A whole new world is opening up to me, a world I never wanted to know, one where human suffering is a commodity. It's a shameful and broken part of our culture. I want to run away from it, but how? To where? Erik is in there, and he is my best friend. I love him. God help me, it's actually true. Now I really feel like running away. I turn off the light and pull the covers over my head. I twist and turn in darkness, but sleep will not come. I keep seeing images of Erik beaten up and bloodied. Finally, I tear the covers off me and sit up. The situation is maddening. I miss him, and although I hate myself for missing him, I am not going to wait 3 weeks to find out how he is. The uncertainty is slow torture. I'm going to fly to California. I have to go. I can't really imagine what Erik is going through. Erik sleeps. The quiet dark night is occasionally disturbed by shrieks or sounds of men crying. But a pervasive silence has settled through the cell block that encourages most weary minds to rest. Days pass for Erik in isolation, with the time marked only by food trays, light, and darkness. Unable to shower or shave, unable to write or read a book, unable to cover himself with clothing or work at a vocation or task. He is stripped of even the imprint of modern life. But stripped of virtually everything, Erik is experiencing something akin to the ancient practice of self-purging. In diminishing, he is becoming. In loss, his spirit is healing. Unfortunately, he doesn't know any of this and can't appreciate it. Instead, he looks forward to sleep to escape the pain. A baton strikes the outside of Erik's steel door. He is shocked awake. Breakfast, the man outside announced. The cell lights flash on, momentarily blinding him. Disoriented, Erik searches the bare room. The memories of being stripped naked and thrown into the cell flash back to him. Then he remembers the fight, an altercation he couldn't avoid, the kind that happened every day. No one goes to the hole for a 2-punch fistfight. If they can put him in the hole for something like this, what else will they do? A sort of anxiety bordering on panic begins to grip him. In confusion, he asks himself again, why are they at the door? He hears the tray slot being unlocked. The trap door cracks open. He closes his eyes and reminds himself, this is a non-event. It is only a meal. He crawls off his mattress and moves towards the door. He pulls the tray of food into the cell, and the slot is immediately slammed shut and locked. He turns his back to the door and slides down to the floor. He rests the tray on his bare thighs and peers at the food. He is hungry, a constant for prisoners, and his senses absorb the smell and the shades of gray coming from the soupy meat, gravy, and potato mixture on the plate. With no utensils provided, he simply digs his fingers into the food. He lowers his open mouth to the tray and shoves the food in. He chews and swallows, ignoring the taste, and when finished, he licks his fingers and tray to make sure he had every ounce. He leans his head back against the iron door. At mealtime, the entire tier of isolation unit becomes exceptionally quiet. Hunger is a principal motivator in prison, and one of the only luxuries of being sent to the hole is the opportunity to eat meals in private. After resting for a moment, Erik rises to the sink and rinses his hands and mouth. Unable to shave or shower, rinsing has become an obsessive habit for him. He splashes his face and teeth with water, and still dripping, returns to his mattress. He pulls the blanket around his waist and begins to pray. When he is done, he will rise and pace the room, all in keeping with the routine he is gradually developing. He is realizing that even in deprivation, human beings crave routine. Before he can begin his prayer, his tray slot abruptly opens. A heavy blue cloth is pushed through the opening. It drops in a heap to the floor as the slot shuts. Starved of any new experience or sensation, Erik stares at the blue heap for several minutes. Then he rises and, barefoot, paddles to the door. He hunches down and tentatively fingers the material. He lifts it. It's heavy. He sniffs it. It smells fresh. He unfolds it and holds it out in front of him, studying the shape. It's a smock, bare-shouldered, with Velcro straps. He stands and experiments fitting it around himself. It's baggy and not very comfortable. The straps are worn, and they come loose easily, causing the smock to fall off his shoulders to the floor. Satisfied, he returns to his mattress, drops the smock, and begins his prayer.